Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi. It would be really great if people could put their videos on. When you're talking on a webinar, it's really good when you can see people's faces. Thank you, Louise. It's just a lot nicer when you can see a face rather than just a name. So if you could put your cameras on, that would be really good. All right, let me just wait and let everybody through. All right, so tonight's CHIRO chat, I wanted to talk a little bit about getting back to work. You know, it seems as if this COVID thing is starting to slow down a little bit and people are being able to go back to work. And I think I was talking to one of the Toms, I don't know who it was, but we were talking about if you go back to work exactly the way you were before, you probably are not going to succeed. You know, this has created a change within all of us.
Sure.
And so what I wanted to do today is present you to 3 different people that have had 3 different stories, but all of them are very successful. And just maybe if you could take that little bit of wisdom from all of them and apply them to what you're going to do when you go back, I think that would help us all in our journey. Yeah. So our first talker, we've got 2 Toms today and Vismai. So we've got Tom who's out in his garden. As you can see, he's actually hiding from his children and he's got his dog there. Hi,
Hello,
Tom.
everybody. Hello. Hi. Hello.
So tell us a little bit about what you're going to talk about functional neurology today. And what else did you talk about, Tom?
Wherever the conversation takes us, but I think functional neurology is indeed my little niche in within chiropractic. It's what I started specializing in as soon as I graduated. So you know, it sounds only fitting that you know, I'll be talking mostly about functional neurology. Yeah.
And do you think, Tom, do people need to have a pen and paper handy, or the stuff that you're talking about, they'll be able to get it straight away and understand it?
Well, you know, I got about 15 minutes. I think if I go in too much depth in 15 minutes, I'm gonna lose people. So, no, I hope. I mean, I can remind people a little bit about some of the basic principles of you know, functional of neurology, of the impact we have as chiropractors on the nervous system, and maybe, you know, drop a couple of things that make people think of how they can improve what they're doing at the moment.
Cool. All right. Well, the mic is yours. Go for it.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Erin, for having me.
Yeah.
Very, very pleased. Just maybe as a super small, short introduction, I started in 2011 as a chiropractor, and when I was in my final year at the ACC, I got introduced to functional neurology through Nelson Monteiro, who is a Portuguese chiropractor now, and he was already doing a few of the Carrick Institute seminars in London at the time. As soon as I graduated, I was looking at a practice close to Amsterdam, because that's where the Intense 900 series of the Carrick Institute were being taught. And I was kind of very fortunate to come across CHIRO and Jay Postma, who is only half an hour from Amsterdam. And he was one of the first DECMBs in Europe. So I thought there was a vacancy. I thought, let's just give them an email, drive there. So we had a good chat, felt great, applied for the job. And then that was a great starting point for my career. I was there for 6 years in total. Started doing the Carrick Institute seminars immediately. And, you know, Jay was a good mentor. He went along. He was generous in contributing a lot of the costs as well. And also introduced me to the Barcelona Chiropractic College a couple of years later. So then 3 years after starting, I did enough hours to sit the exam in Germany and Holland, which I fortunately passed the first time round, and then started teaching in Barcelona together with Jordi Gutierrez and Jay Postma. And that was super fun, you know, that was cool. I enjoyed that. But unfortunately, that was only for 2 academic years, where I was there one Friday a month. And I'd say for Jay, he stopped teaching after, at the same time as me. So we thought, how can we continue this teaching? And that's when we, 5 years ago now, started Brain and Neuroplasticity, which are postgraduate seminars, modules for chiropractors, which is an introduction into functional neurology. Because back then there was pretty much nothing out there apart from maybe Nicole Oliver or Carrick. And I knew a lot of chiropractors are very interested in understanding the principles and the techniques and the skills of functional neurology in more detail, but maybe don't want to sit 3 days listening about basal ganglia, because the Carrick Institute seminars are really intense. So we thought, let's do day seminars, and let's make it basic, easy to understand, very approachable, and you could use it on Monday in the office. And so that we've been doing for 5 years now, and it's been great. We've been teaching or lecturing over 200 different chiropractors, and but obviously I was supposed to be in Amsterdam on Saturday now, teaching our final module of the series, eye movements and rehabilitation. And that's one thing that kept me busy this lockdown, is recording this seminar. So we turned it into a webinar together with Jay, and we got everything wrapped up. Jay's editing at the moment, and hopefully we'll get that on our website for people to download, to buy and download on the weekend. So that's been great. But why functional neurology? As chiropractors, we're the masters of afferentation. Afferentation, information going into the central nervous system. And not only do we increase the afferentation, but we also restore afferentation. When we assess a spine, 99.9% of us are assessing the palpation skills we have, and finding the subluxations or dysfunctions in the spine, adjust them, improve the afferentation to the brain. And when there is a better afferentation of the brain, better inputs, you will receive, or you will notice, better output of the brain. And a better output of the brain can be, noticeable in many, many things. It can be, a better reaction speed, can be more strength, can be other things cortically, like better concentration, better sleep, all these things that we hear. Not to obviously mention pain inhibition, right? Because whenever you stimulate the system, we don't, a lot of people don't think about it, but when you bump into a cupboard or something, you rub yourself where you hit yourself, because that was painful. You give it a rub. And what you do there is, you stimulate those mechanoreceptors, which travel via the peripheral nervous system into your spinal cord up to your brainstem, and it activates those naturally neurological pain inhibitory centers that are being sent back down to the tissue to basically say it's okay, don't be in such pain. So with chiropractic adjustments, we improve the input, and by improving the input, we improve the output. And the output can be, like I said before, anything from pain inhibition to better strength, reaction speed, balance, concentration, all these other things. That's why we see these amazing results as chiropractors. But, it's not always as simple as that. Sometimes, we got to be a little bit more selective with the input that we generate. I think I speak for myself. I mean, maybe not other people, but I think a lot of other people as well, maybe particularly in the beginning of their career, we're very enthusiastic about adjusting. And sometimes we notice that after the adjustment, maybe the patient is a little bit, that was a bit much. We overstimulated the system. So that's one little but. Do we sometimes overstimulate a patient by just adjusting everything we meet along the way? It's a very powerful impact and adjustment. And just to take you back for a second, if you think about this afferentation, this input, just to remind people that 70% of our cortical input, roughly 7, depends which book you read, which reference you use, but roughly 70% of our input to the brain is coming from our musculoskeletal system, our tendons, our muscles, ligaments, etc., capsules. Only 30% is coming from our other senses, like vision, what we hear, see, smell, and taste. So it's crucially important that 70% is working properly. Now, of that 70% of our musculoskeletal system, the spine is the most crucial part, right? So whenever you are, sitting down and all your limbs are relaxed, there is not a lot of information going to the brain there, but your spine is always battling gravity. If I wouldn't have any tone and information being sent from my cervical spine to my brain and back, I would go all floppy. So your spine is an abundance. It's got an abundance of mechanoreceptors. So when something is stuck there, you are basically robbing, your brain of that excellent or that superb input. So as chiropractors, we adjust, as I said before, better input, better output. However, the higher you go in the spine, the bigger the impact can become. And so, but number one is, adjusting everybody high cervical, for example, you might have the odd patient that just can't take that because it's a little bit too much, because their central nervous system isn't geared up for such a big impact in one go. The other thing is that the general state of the central nervous system, it can also be potentially a disbalance in the central nervous system. Sometimes you notice that if you do your examination, your functional neurological examination, that particular parts of the brain are working better than others. So then the question becomes, how can we improve brain function, brain areas very specifically through our treatments? And again, adjusting is an excellent tool, but there are many, many other tools that we can use. If, for example, adjusting is too much of an input, we can use the vestibular system as a source of input. We can use the eyes, which are a great window to the brain. We can use the eyes for diagnostic measures to see where there is a disbalance, but also to then use it as a therapeutic modality, either in the practice or at home. And so using these techniques, using the testing, because it all starts with assessing what's going on, right? And not just the palpation assessment, but the functional neurological assessment, testing left brain, right brain, testing frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital, testing the cerebellum as well. Which parts of the cerebellum? These are all things that we're aiming as with our brain and neuroplasticity seminars to make simple and understandable. Don't go in overly much detail, but after our seminar, you will know that, okay, the cerebellum, you get the mid part, the vestigial part, the lateral part, the dentate part. How do we test that? There's something wrong. Great. How do we improve it? These, in my opinion, is the 10% that a lot of us, or myself, were missing. So if you have 80% of people walking through your door, or let me say differently, out of all people walking through your door, about 80, 85, 90%, depends how, how good you are, I suppose, where we can help. It's a fantastic job we all have. But we can't help 100%. We can't help 99%. But if you want to improve from 85% to 90 or 95%, those 5 or 10% of people are extremely valuable, because those are the people that haven't been helped by your care in the past or by your colleagues' care. And it's probably because there are underlying things going on that hasn't been assessed before. So for me, like I say, I don't treat everybody purely functional neurologically. It's exhausting to do that. It's very time consuming. It's very mentally, cognitively draining sometimes. And I have, a lot of normal chiropractic patients. They're not all concussion patients or anything like that. But if you get stuck, if you notice there's something a little bit more going on than just your typical low back, neck pain or whatever, it's very, very worthwhile to assess a little bit more, test, treat, and retest. And you will see that those 10%, that you will gain 10% in your good outcome. And like I said before, it's super valuable if it's because those people, you really, really change their lives. We change everybody. We make healthier or make feel better. We change their lives. But would the chiropractor down the block also would have achieved that? Maybe, probably. But for those 10% that have been around all the blocks, it's very, it's beautiful. It's very satisfying to be able to help somebody like that by just, knowing your neurology a little bit more and being trained to apply different neurological strategies. I think that's in a nutshell. Now, why do we, just one little thing to debunk everything I just said, which is always silly, right? But why are we so successful as chiropractors, and why are we so good in improving brain function, regardless of the testing and the retesting or the neurological background we have? Is because very, very often, those subluxations that are present in the spine, those hypomobility joints, they are causing the disbalance of the brain in the first place. It's either cause and effect. Is it cause and effect? We don't know. But if you have several joints not working in a particular direction, in a particular fashion, that is obviously a rob of the brain, a rob of input to the brain. So do we have to know it's the right frontal lobe and then go and look in the left side of the body? Or do we just check body assessments, adjust that, and 9 out of 10, you will pick and adjust the right joint, also from a neurological point of view. You know what I mean? So but that's all from a spinal point of view. I think there is a lot more we can do with the eyes. With for example, if you have somebody with recurrent headaches, and you keep adjusting the cervical spine, and you do everything from a muscular and joints perspective, but these headaches keep coming back, and then suddenly you think, okay, let's just check the eye function, because this person is working behind a computer, right? Is reading a lot computer screen, and you check the saccadic eye movements, which is what we use, quick, fast eye movements when we read. We jump. We don't follow a line. We don't do a smooth pursuit reading. We do saccadic eye movements. If we test the saccadic eye movements and we notice that they're actually very poor, and we work on them, then suddenly you will see that, hey, hold on a second, I might not have focused so much on those recurrent neck fixations, but we fixed the eye movements, and because the eye movements are improved, there is less strain, and less strain in the eyes is less strain on the cervical spine, because those things are interlinked. Eyes, balance, and the spine is all interlinked via the MLF, the medial longitudinal fasciculus. That will be the only complicated word, but I'm sure we all recognize it. So the link between balance, eyes, and spine is direct. It doesn't even go to the brain. So, like I say, recurrent symptoms, patients that are stuck, look further than just spine. The answer might lie in their balance centers, might lie in the cerebellum, might lie in their eye function. And there are easy techniques really to assess for it and to treat it. I think I'm going to take a breath. Is that a bit clear, or was that a bit too quick?
No, it was clear. But tell us, Tom, like, what's a typical adjustment like from you? Imagine I come in, I was like, hey, Tom, can you give me an adjustment? Like, what happens in your day-to-day at work? Like, how does that roll? How does that go?
Well, from a day-to-day, it depends if it's the first time I see you or not. So first, new patients, I take an hour, to do a proper examination assessment, and then when you return, my average visit is 20 minutes, which gives me plenty of time to either talk about Liverpool not becoming champion, or if it's necessary, talk about, do a bit more neurological assessments. I always, if returning or not, do a very quick neurological scan. And it's you stand there. I start with a Rombergs. Close your eyes, feet together, outstretched arms, spread your fingers. I do a finger to nose. So with the balance, you test the mid part of the cerebellum. With the finger to nose, you test a little bit more the lateral side of the cerebellum. You have them seated. Obviously, go to the range of motion while they stand there. Lumbar spine, rated on a visual analog scale if it's discomfortable or not. Have them seated to assess their thoracic and cervical spine, and then do some finger tapping. So quick finger tapping, is a very easy test to do for testing the cortical spinal integrity, or in other words, how good is your contralateral frontal lobe functioning. And what you often see, because these are cool ones, finger to nose, you will often see, and I challenge everybody that's listening to this, to, as soon as we're allowed to see patients again, just pick one of the exercises or one of the tests I'm talking about today, a day, and then the next day you do another test. It's very quick. What you will see in more patients than you think is that they will be very accurate, very, very good with their left, for example, and then slightly off with their right. Now, this is a good example of a functional neurological difference. This isn't an ablative lesion. This isn't a patient that has a stroke or a MS and is completely off the chart. We are looking at the details, because the details can show us something. So, for example, finger to nose, left perfect, right slightly off. You're a little bit dysmetric, maybe a little bit dyspraxic. That tells me immediately right cerebellum, lateral part, the dentate part of the right cerebellum. Okay, we remember that. The more you train this, the more you can kind of remember this without writing down in your brain. Right. And then you sit down, you think already, okay, we're talking right cerebellum. We know that the right side of the right cerebellum communicates more with the left cortex. So you're already a little bit biased, maybe, of observing things that might not be working as good in the left cortex. So then you do your finger tapping. Now this is a cerebrum, a cortex test. So that is going to be contralateral. So if we're doing this on the left, this can be very good. And then on the right, you will see that it's maybe fast, but it's got a couple of rhythm breaks. So with this test, we look at speed and rhythm. When there are a couple of rhythm breaks on the right-hand side, we know, okay, maybe this left frontal lobe isn't working so great. We'll remember that. One point, one bad point, one little tick in the right cerebellum lateral, one little point in the left frontal lobe. So then you move on. And again, this is all done with every recurrent patient. You ask me day-to-day patients.
Mm-hmm.
If it's the first time you have to go through these tests, it will take you a while, because but this becomes as if you train this, it becomes as quickly as the capital of France is Paris. You don't need to think about it. Dermatome C7, C6, C7, all this kind of knowledge, it becomes like second nature.
And Tom, do you
No.
manually adjust everybody? Do you feel that neurologically it changes if you manually adjust, or if you use an activator? Does it change the effect?
98% would be adjusted, like your standard chiropractic adjusting skills. There are only very few that I use activator, that I use percussion as well, because vibration can cause contralateral input to the parietal lobe, for example. But mostly, I adjust. I have an activator, but I mostly adjust it. My wife's grandma, who's 92, I treat a little bit more gentle with my laser machine and stuff. But so then, just to find, I know I was talking, you always got to be careful which questions you ask me, because I keep going. So after the finger tapping, we go to the eyes, and then I just do my palpation. And with the eyes, I do a smooth pursuit, saccadic eye movements, and that will tell me more about the brainstem, but also frontal and parietal. And then I have them laying down, assess. And in this scenario, right, in this hypothetical scenario where the right cerebellum and the left cortex is clearly in a disbalance, I'm gonna adjust more on the right-hand side to stimulate more the right cerebellum and the contralateral cortex, because this patient will be served better if not only the subluxations are fixed, but also you improved the disbalance in the brain, in the central nervous system. So it's just chiropractic with neurology, with a little bit more neurology into it. So yeah, that's what I do, and that's what together with Jay Postma I'm trying to, or we're teaching other chiropractors.
And I can see Jay's on the call. I said hi to Jay before. Hey, did anybody have any questions for Tom? You can just unmute yourself and ask Tom a question if you wanted to. No?
Yes, hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Just to ask you if the seminar open to students or only DCs?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I just didn't get that.
Yeah, if your seminars are open to students or only DCs?
Oh yeah, no. We did a series in Barcelona, which we had about 50% students. It's open to students as well, yeah. Both the seminars, we have a discount rate. I think it's 50% of the price, and that will also be downloadable for students. And this is the nice thing. I think students, it's not of the intense Carrick Institute level. I don't want to undersell what we do, but it's almost a good thing in my opinion, because for me, I was sitting there and about 80% went over my head almost. So it's something that I wouldn't recommend it if in your first or second year. It's very convenient if you got basic neurology down, because you can only start talking about functional neurology if you got your basic neurology down. So we don't spend time talking about dermatomes and radiculopathy so much. But if you once in the third, fourth, fifth year, I'm sure it would be value to you. And in my opinion, and I think in many people's opinion, like a Jordy, like a Nelson, like a Jay, it's something that is almost, well, it's definitely crucial and essential for every chiropractor. Because think about this, depending where you work, where you live, more and more people start adjusting spines. And I think we've always said as chiropractors, we affect the nervous system. We're experts of the nervous system. And I totally agree with that. But we got to be able to, to back that statement. And we can only back it by really understanding how the nervous system works and how our treatments affect the nervous system. When I graduated, I asked myself, drop me in a room full of GPs, manual therapists, and they ask you to explain how your spinal adjustment affects the nervous system. I would get uncomfortable as a freshly grad. If from the ACC. Now I feel like my heart rate wouldn't go up by by that question. And I think it's essential. So yeah. But obviously, I was going to say that.
Okay. And
Okay,
Tom, I'm
thank
going to
you.
cut you off. We were only going to be 15 minutes. We've already been half an hour.
Oh damn! Really? Oh god. Sorry about that. Sorry to the other two guys. What else can I say? Everything is great in England. Life is good. Hopefully back to work soon.
Yeah.
It's been a roller coaster. We got 2 practices. We had our practice and our house burned down a year after opening. We're still living somewhere else, but that's all good. I live in a house of a patient because she was happy with her care, so she's doing us a deal. So, if we look after our patients, patients look after us.
That's right. That's right. Definitely. Thank you so much, Tom.
Yeah, sorry it took a little bit too long. I didn't look at my clock.
And right now, the other Tom, it's your turn. But yeah, you've only got 5 minutes. Okay, so.
Sorry, dude.
No, I'm joking.
Why don't I can go another time, Aaron?
No, I was joking.
No, it's cool. I'll race this.
Tom
mate.
can just
I'll be
do it
quick.
now, and I'll come on another time. It's fine.
No.
Dude, I'll be quick. Don't worry, mate. 10 minutes. You got it.
No. So from one Tom to another. Now, we've got a whole nother thing. Tom, you're going to tell us about, like getting the word out there, different means, different avenues to get the word out there. So tell us, go for it.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm super excited to be here today. Thank you everyone for jumping on the call. I really appreciate it. It's like totally different time zones everywhere. While I'm in here hiding from the sun, I can see loads of you outside in the sun, which is amazing. I never thought that I'd have more hair on my head than my face, but this whole COVID thing has meant I've had to shave my beard so I can put a mask on, and my hair hasn't had a cut. But if you're used to seeing me on the stage, I've normally got a big beard and not much hair up top. So I'm here, I'm a different shape, but I'm here to bring you some great content. So it's really interesting these times. Everybody is in chaos. And the chaos doesn't necessarily mean that your job is different, because there's a lot of people who are still going to work doing the same thing. But there's a lot of judgment coming out right now. There's a lot of judgment of others, of our peers, of our neighbors, of our friends for what they're doing in regards to the whole time that's going on. And I think what that comes down to is a huge lack of certainty and a huge lack of direction in our communities. So what I want to do is I want to just talk a little bit about how you can take the leadership, take the ownership of your communities and really emerge as a leader as we move forward. And a really nice definition of a leader that I love is a leader is someone who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. Who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. And Tom's come on just giving us a great synopsis of functional neurology. And he certainly knows the way, and he's leading his community through like that. And I'm sure there's a lot of you on this call who lead your communities. But as Aaron was saying at the top of the show, the most dangerous thing we can do right now, for our business is to go back to how we were. The most dangerous thing we can do right now for our business is to go back to how we were. And I really do think that there's a chance to change that. So for me, I've got to make a huge change. So I am known for doing a lot of public talks. I've spoken all around the world. I lead, anywhere from leading police and fire well-being in this country to over 1,000 officers, to talking to 50 officers, to jumping on a plane and doing a presentation in Europe and then over to the States and back. I can't do that. I literally can't do that anymore. So I've got to completely change how I do my business. And one of the most important things, we have to learn how to diversify, and things like the webinar series that we're doing right now, or things like podcasts, which I've been involved in for a long time, radio, which I've been involved in for a long time, still hold true. The beautiful thing is they all have exactly the same principle behind them. And it all comes down to how you can deliver your message in a way that your audience hears. And whenever I'm teaching people to do public speaking, what I always teach them is something called a logical sale. I like to teach people how to do a logical sale. I think people will see, and even more so nowadays as everybody's backs are up and there's a lot of judgment, people will see through sales tactics if you're just trying to pull someone into your practice. I think Vismai going to talk a little bit about making a really sustainable practice, and his message is incredible. So stay on the call for that. But if we're going to build a really true reputation, a strong and a rich practice, you have to come at that as authentically you. You have to come at it as authentically you. And what I want to do is I want to take a couple of minutes to teach you how you can tell a story, because the best way you can showcase what you do, come across as authentically you, is to tell a story. What I've also done, because I know the time is limited, I knew it'd be like this, Aaron. So what I have done is I've put on a webinar on Monday. So I'd love you to join me for a webinar on Monday. It's free, where I'm going to do the whole foundations of public speaking, the whole lot, from how to say it, what to say, what kind of tone to use, what kind of dialect to use, how to manage your audience. So there's a free webinar for you on that on Monday. And I've just put the link, I'll put the link for that into your feed right now. So if you look in the chat, there's the link for that. But I'd love to see you on Monday. But let's go for it. Let's talk about how people can tell a story in a way that your audience understands and hopefully get some benefit from this. So I'm going to share my screen. And I'd love it if you could do me a favor. If you haven't got your pictures on, if you haven't got your screens on and you're not in your underwear, it'd be great if you could just undo your screenshot. So I was teaching some of my team the other day, and I had my team on, and I said, right, I want you to jump up and do this for me. And she looked into the camera sheepishly, and she was like, no. I was like, can you please jump up and do this for me? She was sat there in just a t-shirt. So I'm sure a lot of you are doing that, but if you're not, I'd love to see your faces. There's a few of you there. It's brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. So I can see who I'm talking to and who I'm interacting with. Can I get a wave if you can see my screen? Can you see the screen I've shared? That's awesome. Thank you, Clara. I really appreciate that wave. Thank you. So let's do this. And I'm going to race through this because it's super, super simple. Telling a story is as old as time. If you look at some of the richest communities, and when I say rich, I'm a very spiritual person, so I mean soul rich when I use that term. When I say rich, you look at some of the richest communities on earth, North Africa, South America, they all tell stories and they learn from their elders and they come together as a group. And it's an amazing way to lead and teach. But when you teach people and you lead people through stories, you're not logically trying to tell them anything. You're trying to appeal to their emotions. If you look at any of the most successful companies in history, they sell you on the benefits of what you're going to buy, not the features of what you're going to buy, the benefits of what you're going to buy. So for instance, my wife, Sarah, who is an amazing individual, said, Tom, I want to go shopping in Nottingham, which is a town about an hour away. I said, that's cool, so long as we can go past the Aston Martin garage on the way home. As you may know, Aston Martins are fantastic cars. And she reluctantly said yes. So we went into the garage, went up to look at these cars, and I started showing her. I said, look at this one. It's even got a sat nav on it, and look at the way the lights wrap around. This probably goes 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. It's amazing. And I was telling her all the features of the car. And then the salesman walks across. And he says, man, would you like me to turn the engine on? And he simply turns the engine on. Vroom. Car comes to life. And he says, you know what, when you sit in that car, you'll have a smile on your face and you feel like you're on top of the world. And Sarah, ever since then, has wanted an Aston Martin. So I've been working doubly hard to try and get one of those. But he sold it on the benefits of it, not the features. And the same is true for your service and your gift that you bring to the world, whether you're a chiropractor or someone else on the call. You provide huge benefit to these people. Tom was talking about working with people with, brain injury. I've had some serious collisions with my head over the years, and I've actually seen functional neurology chiropractors to really help me with that. It wasn't the features I went to them for, it was the benefit that I received in going. And that's the same thing when we're telling a story. So this is it. Super simple. If you've got a pen and paper handy, you only need to write 5 words. The simple way to remember how to tell a story is to remember these 5 words. How can someone describe something? How can someone describe something? Now, this is becoming even more important to understand the concepts behind telling a story nowadays. When you get up in front of a stage and you're speaking to a big audience, you know what you're going to talk about. And the bigger the audience, the less chance there will of you being challenged. So you can own your stuff, but you can kind of get away with it. If you've ever done radio or TV, there is a big chance of a curveball. And the way people get thrown off with a curveball is that they don't answer the question with the benefits. They go straight into the features They revert to type. They go straight into the features. What you need to do is you need to understand, well, how can I turn any concept, any understanding that I've got, any journey of a patient or a practice member into a story that my audience is going to hear. And it comes down to understanding how you tell a story. And it's these 5 words. How can someone describe something? And to race through it, it simply stands for, H stands for humility and vulnerability, C stands for characters, S stands for scene, D for dialogue, and S for keeping it simple. The most important one that we have here is humility and vulnerability. If you're going to tell a story and you really want to connect with your audience, the most important thing you need to do is be super vulnerable, super humble, and be 100% authentically congruent to yourself. Because you're already standing up in front of a stage, they see you as an expert. But here's where the dichotomy is. People don't like an expert. People don't like an expert. If you're going to build your community, if you're going to build your practice, it has to be built on community. The reason our practice has stayed alive and is thriving is because we have a strong community. Community comes by being part of it, not above it, part of it. So when you're delivering a talk and you want to get your message out there, being humble, being vulnerable is super, super important for connecting with your audience. When you tell that story, you have to have characters. You have to actually have people in the story. And even more importantly, those people have to be exactly the same demographic as the people you're talking to. So if I'm going to go and do a talk to GB England triathlon team, and I start telling stories about these 80-year-old people who've got really well with care, it makes no sense. So you have to make sure that your characters match your audience. You build a scene from those characters. The best way you can build a scene is with color. The best way you can build a scene is with color. If I was to tell you to think of a red hat, you'd all think of some kind of red hat. It might be a French beret. It might be a baseball cap like I've got on. It might be a little fez. But you've all got that image of a hat straight away in your head. But the thing that conjured it was not a hat, it was the color. Add some dialogue between those characters so you bring them to life, actually have conversation, monologue or dialogue. And the most important, well, the second most important apart from vulnerable, is to be simple. If you've ever read an amazing book, it's called The 4 Agreements. And it really talks about how we see the world. Now, I see the world extremely differently to every single other person on this call. So if I start to get too specific with the story I'm telling, you'll create some bias between what you're saying and what your audience is thinking. Whereas if you keep it simple, you stay in agreement and they build up the picture in their own mind. So if someone asks you a question on the radio or someone challenges you on a webinar, it's really important to try and get back into the stories. And the 5 things you need to remember are simple as, how can someone describe something? Which stands for being humble, creating characters, a scene, dialogue, and keeping it super, super simple. It's really important that we understand the richness of this, because nowadays we're going into a world that's not doing too much of the stage. I'm just going to unshare. Stop share. We're now going into an area where we can't really get in front of audiences. We tried some social distancing talks here just before the lockdown, and it worked really, really well. But for now, we're doing lots of webinars. And it's amazing how you can bring your community together with webinars. It's super, super simple. But it takes a couple of specific things that you really need to work on. One of the biggest things you don't get from a webinar that you do get from an audience is feedback. Not a feedback. One of the most important things I always teach people when they do public speaking is my room, my rules. My room, my rules. So one of the things we do really encourage and sometimes don't let people into the calls if they're not got their video on, because that's a super, super important way to engage them. But it's also a really, really great way to create another sense of talk, which you can't do in a public talk, which is have a chat box going on the side. So it's actually a really great forum to connect with your community. So some of the stuff we've been doing over the last few weeks, for the first 3 weeks we were closed before we reopened, was having webinars on a regular basis, Facebook Lives every single day. If you want to go and look at my Facebook page, there's Facebook Lives every single day for our patients. Exactly the same thing. We're going on there, we're telling a story, we're keeping them engaged. To the point where they're now knocking on the door and ready to come back in to see us. If you take the group, you know, every year I deliver a talk to 1,000 police officers in the community. We created a video series that we gave to the police force. Way over 1,000 people have now watched and digest these videos. So there's some really great ways to get out there. And whether you are standing on a stage or whether you are doing a webinar or a podcast, it all comes down to the ability to say your story, deliver the public talk in a way that your audience understands. So the link is there on your chat. You can also go to where's it gone? It's gone. My computer got rid of it. You can also go to my website to find the free. I'm typing here. To find the free webinar, which is there
on the group thing too, Tom, as well.
Is on the group thing. Cool. So
I will put it on there now.
Thank you very much. So if you want to go into that a bit more detail, Monday evening at 7 p.m. UK time, it's 8 p.m. for you guys over on the mainland Europe. I'll be doing a full hour on it, talking about how you can change your tone of voice, how you can move around the stage, how you can control your audience, as well as going into more detail of telling a story. It'll be my pleasure to share that with you to help you get back into the community. Because as Tom said, you know, we've all got a huge gift to share with our communities. And I really do want us to come and emerge from this as the true leaders for the future of healthcare in our countries.
So, Tom, thank you very much for that. That was really informative. Thank you. Can I ask you a question too? Like with your webinars and your podcasts and stuff, do you get many first visits actually coming in from that? Like people directly refer? Like how do you? If you have the community, that's great. And then how do you convert into getting new visits from that as well?
Cool. So great. So I suppose that really comes down to two things. So I think at the moment, so marketing and sales, two very different things. So when we're building a business, marketing and sales, very different things. At the moment, for most of us in the countries we're in, it's very difficult to do sales. It's very difficult to do sales. So we have to put a lot of our time into marketing. The unfortunate thing about marketing is very ethereal, as in you can't measure it. However, you can become, and I don't want to steal too much from Vismai because I know he's going to talk about this, but you can become the authority figure in your community through a lot of marketing. So at the moment, if you're putting the content out, you're putting the videos out, who's the first person they're going to get on the phone and call? It's going to be you. But in terms of what we're doing, we've got the Facebook videos going out, we've got advertisements through to a webinar, people join the webinar, and then what you can do is as they join the webinar, you've now got their email, and then you can start to market, and you can create an email list, which would then turn into a sale or a sales pitch.
I mean, I definitely feel the old days of going down the street and doing a country fair or going to the gym and doing a screening have definitely gone, you know? So
it's true. And you know what, my team will book me a talk at lunchtime. I'll go and do a 20-minute talk, and we've got anywhere between 5 and 50 new patients from a 20-minute talk.
Right.
Send a team out to a country fair for a weekend. Like, we still do screenings, but my team do screenings. I don't do screenings. That's not me.
Yeah.
But the same is true. You know, telling the stories and communicating your message one-on-one is the same as one-to-many.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Did anybody have any questions for Tom? No? Okie dokie. We're going on to our third speaker. Thank you, Vismai, for staying awake. It's nearly 1 o'clock in the morning in Singapore.
Yes.
Right now. So he's there waiting for us. So thank you for holding in. And I'm sure from just leading in from Tom, the story, you have quite a story to tell.
Well, that was a great segue, actually, Tom, because I mean, we've spoke with 2 Toms have just mentioned, you know, like times are different now, you know, and I think there's one big burning question that's floating around, at least within my small group of friends within chiropractic, my mastermind, but I'm also starting to notice it emerge more and more about, gosh, how are we going to retain our clients, you know? So, and I think that stems out of a fear around if our businesses are really going to struggle, you know? So it's a kind of a very real fear that's present in the chiropractic community. And so I'm getting asked this question now more than I've ever been asked in my entire life, actually. And the question is this: it's like, how did we go from having this leaky bucket and a high churn rate of people into a PVA that sort of went up to 100 quite quickly, and eventually my PVA got to 2000 actually. So how did we get to that so I could practice in a really easy way, in just using my own natural ways without, you know, even if I didn't like to do scriptings, or I didn't like to do spinal screenings, or I didn't like to do Facebook ads, or I didn't want to subject myself to some of the sort of cheesy things that made my guts churn if I got asked to do that, you know. How did we actually do that? And I think this is a new part of moving forward, is that we need to make this bridge with your own values. Tom's just mentioned about showing up authentically. And one of the biggest grapples that Jyoti and I had at the beginning was that we found it really difficult to get this authenticity with our private life and the authenticity with the practice. There was a real friction point at that interface. So, I mean, there was a few friction points. Financially, there was a friction point because after 3 years, we had no money. We'd been building the practice. We got a tax bill, and, you know, we'd rush off after having those meetings with the accountant where you just glaze at the figures and you think, oh gosh, you know. And after 3 years though, I come home from work that night and Jyoti was sort of sitting there and she says, gosh, what are we going to do? You know, we've got all these dreams, we've got our goals, we want to go traveling, we want to have a sabbatical. We even had a very altruistic goal to have a vision of our practice for 200 years. You know, we wanted to leave a legacy in the community, but the actual truth of the matter was, if I got sick for a month, the whole show was over. So we actually, that was a very big reality check actually for us, you know, and that just came because we didn't have a clue what we were doing. I was 28 at the time, which is another really big myth in chiropractic, is that because you're an exceptional chiropractor, it's sort of a lot of the myth is that you think you're going to be an exceptional chiropractic business owner. Mm-hmm. And it's got almost nothing to do with it. The technician, the chiropractor, and the business owner, it is like night and day, you know. So we got really friggin' desperate, you know, like we really didn't know what we were doing. So we thought, what can we do? So we ended up flying around the whole world. We really did the work, you know, we really worked on ourselves so extremely. We spent a lot of money on seminars, but our first one, we went and did the DeMartini financial mastery course in Houston. And we just learned so much about money that week. And we'd never studied money before. The money was coming in. You know, I was sort of had a bit of a blind eye to the finances around the business. So I think I was a bit naive and a bit altruistic, but I soon quickly realized that I have to face up to the responsibility of being a business owner, you know? So we just went and did a lot of courses on business. We went and did a lot of courses on finance. We went to many, many chiropractic seminars and spoke to many successful chiropractors. Some of them confused us even more than what we first went there with. But one thing that I just want to share with you, I just got off the phone to Jyoti just before this call, and I said to her, oh gosh, I'm about to go on this webinar. What should I talk about? And she said, I'm just too tired to think. Just don't ask me. And I said, okay, you know, she doesn't often say that. And she said, I'm so tired from people me having to explain what I believe about this whole COVID thing. And I'm so sick of looking on Facebook stories of people posting this, and then, you know, good friends posting this, and then one friend not believing her and another friend believing her. And she just got really exhausted from all these discussions. And it reminded me of getting integrity in my practice. I thought I was exhausted after that third year. I had no money. I had Mr. Smith who'd come in and he'd drive me nuts. And then I'd had his wife come in and she was the nicest lady ever. And I wanted all Mrs. Smiths, you know. I had a yoga teacher who sent 65 new patients to me after about the third month of having the practice. And about 3 or 4 months after that, she turned on me and she told everybody not to come to me anymore because their T7 was back in place, or their scoliosis was better, or their headache was gone. And then I had like the radiologist in the local hospital near our practice. He sent so many people for 10 years and his whole family came, and I couldn't make sense that a yoga teacher doesn't get it and then a radiologist specialist in a hospital did get it, you know. So I started to explore extremely deeply, and this is where it all comes back to values. I started to explore, what is it that makes him come and her not? What is it that made Mr. Smith wear me out and that I was really tired? And then Mrs. Smith had come, and I'd see her name in the agenda, and I'd be just so happy that she was coming. You know, she'd be on time, she'd pay, she'd be friendly to the people in the waiting room, she'd treat my staff really well, and she'd leave. You know, it was just such an easy interaction. Anyway, I got really tired actually, and I just couldn't make sense of my community. Then I was at CHIRO Europe, and it wasn't nobody was speaking actually. And I was just standing at the bar, and I actually started eavesdropping on a conversation. And you know, when you sometimes go to seminars and you really get some blinders from a seminar in unexpected ways, you know, this changed my life forever, what happened just now, because I felt like with this information, I'd cracked the friggin' code, and I was so relieved. So I was overhearing Dr. Guy Rickman, and he was saying to a friend of mine, listen, there's 4 discussions that you got to look for in these people. These 4 discussions is what everybody has around their health. And I just heard them, and I just had to think of about 20 of my clients, and it all just made sense. So I went up to my room that night. I had a big pile of those yellow post-it stickers that I often take to seminars, and I was like a crazy professor in my room, just sorting out all my favorite clients and all the ones that drove me nuts or drained me of energy, or I didn't really like, or they were always going against my belief. They wanted scientific proof for chiropractic. They wanted to ask me about how irresponsible it was that we didn't vaccinate the kids. And it was pretty much what Jyoti's having now, you know. I just got really friggin' tired from that, you know. So not only did we have any money, but I was tired. And the whole thing was resting on my shoulders. And most people in this call, the practice is resting on your shoulders, and you can't have it like that. So we've just developed this kind of 3-phase process that takes your leaky bucket and high churn rate into a way of ease and grace in practice, you know. So like any artist, like any good ballerina or any pianist, there's a whole lot of work you got to do to be able to perform in a concert hall in front of crowds. You've got to have all your fundamentals right. You know, a lot of people say to me, oh, you're so lucky you get to have a sabbatical, or oh, you're so lucky you had a successful practice. But no one ever says, wow, you worked so freaking hard. You know, we really grinded after that third year. Between that year 3 and the next, I'd say 8 solid years we put in, we really worked, you know. We really did the rudimentary skills. We learned how to run a business. We learned how to communicate. And the biggest thing was I learned how to attract people who loved me. So why I got so graceful and so profitable and had a huge retirement nest egg after 8 years was because I got paid first every month by people who really loved me. These people really loved me. I just want to share my screen with you because it reminds me of just one little diagram. Let's have a look at share screen. I just got one little simple thing I want to show you, because this is really gonna help you guys. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
So at the start of the office, if you see those red things, they're values, right? I didn't even know what my own values were. I never really even thought at all what a value is, right? So I've got a few of my values going towards the chiropractic business, and the chiropractic business has got its values going at me with all a schizophrenic mix of clients that I couldn't make any collective value of, right, or sense of. And then later down the bottom, it was just all my values just going from top to bottom, from my private life all the way through the business. Tom just said, no, you've got to show up as your true, authentic self. For me, this is it. This is the key to the true, authentic self. This is where there's no difference from me sitting here now talking with you guys or me in the office. It's just, I just want the people that love me. And what do I mean by love me? That they share my values. There's 4 of them. There's humanism, which means they've got a friendly relationship with their body. There's naturalism, which means they see their body as a part of nature. There's vitalism, which basically means they acknowledge the cleverness, or they think their body's clever. And there's holism, that they just see this whole thing as a thing. So what did this lead to, right? This led to me, and this was something very, sorry, before I move to the next slide, something quite counterintuitive happened here, because I poised my growth. When I started to get, after this Guy Reichman story, I started to get this sense of like, oh, great, there's a few more Mrs. Smiths coming and a few less Mr. Smiths coming. And it was so cool. I was so excited. So I just started to make a 2-week waiting list, even though there was no waiting list. I just wanted to poise the whole thing and get a grip. So that's phase 2 of my work, is just going vertical with people. So I just started going out for dinner with them, going for walks on the beach with them. I wanted to know what they were reading, what movies they were watching. I wanted to know what clothes they wear, where they went on their holidays, what friend groups they hung out in. You know, I just studied these people exhaustively, and we ended up making this value analog scale, which was great for grading new clients. So we didn't have to wait till the end of the month to know if we were winning, because we knew, based on the skills that we developed over that next 10 years, we just developed this skill set in grading somebody. Are they natural, whole, human, and vital, you know? And we just had a scale. So we knew exactly what sentences they would use. We knew what shades of clothes they'd be wearing, what they'd have in their supermarket bag, where they got their hair cut, where they'd buy their meat. We knew everything about that, and my CA certainly did, and they become extremely skillful in extrapolating that information. So we just knew, yes, they're one of us, we're winning. So we were just filling that bucket. What came out of that was really cool, because, this is a funny photo of me, that bucket didn't get empty. That bucket resulted in me having all these red ones where just clients that didn't really want me and I didn't want them, because our values didn't match. It was no judgments, or it was just like let's just state the fact, you know. But what happened was no one left anymore. So I ended up having needing 1 new person for every 2,500 new people. And that's what we've got to move forward now with. People have had enough time to get to know their values this time. If people haven't thought about that now, they're never going to. But you've got to somehow, when they come back in after COVID, they're going to size you up, man. They're going to be like, have this person got the juice? Have they got what it takes to get me through this process? And they're going to be really frank about it, actually. So if you're not sharing values with them, or if you're not taking the relationship vertical, it's going to be really difficult, because to try and, like you just said, Aaron, this whole idea of rocking up to a fair and all these new people coming, if you're going to try and build your practice after COVID, just based on this new patient churn, you're in for a really tough year, you know? And it doesn't have to be like that, right? So at a certain point, you get momentum from this group. At least this is what happened to us. It took maybe, 18 months to 2 years. And I could honestly say I had a sizable base of people that shared my values and who really loved me, you know? And they sent people to me who also really loved me, and I loved them too. But then what we did, then we took the whole relationship horizontal. This is where we started scaling. This is where I started to employ other chiropractors to replace myself, because our dream was to have a sabbatical. And this was brilliant. So this is a book that I wrote. This is my Dutch book. I wrote this book and it got released in 2009. I self-published it.
You have to put
And
up
we,
the photo. You can't see it.
Is that better? We had the book launch. There was about 300 people came to the book launch. And I left that night with like literally a carload of flowers. The Dutchies love their flowers. But the social proof I got that night was incredible. Anyone sitting on the fence thinking, were they coming to our office or not? They were coming after that evening, right? So we went from 2 chiropractors to 4 chiropractors within the space of 6 months. So the whole thing really scaled. So all those vertical relationships that I did and poised the growth of the practice allowed me then to go horizontally with that and just drop into so many more. So we started employing other chiropractors. And then we started to reap the rewards of the risk that we'd taken and the hard work that we'd put in to build a practice and to build a business. And we built a freaking business. It wasn't a job, you know, to the point that I left one time for 12 months and I had 2 phone calls in the whole 12 months. One time when the building was leaking and another time when the front desk operating system broke down. And I returned after that with so much more money in my bank and growth in the practice of more than 10%. And it was amazing. It was like we just, you know, we'd come out the other side. We'd enter this tunnel extremely naively. Then we got into this really messy section and then we acknowledged that. And then everything got really hard, you know, so to implement all this was extremely hard work. We needed a lot of help from a lot of people. But then somehow some light started to come at the end of the tunnel, and all of a sudden we owned a business. We ended up selling the business to one of my good friends who'd been working with us for 5 years. The same CAs are still there. They started in 2001. They're all still there, and the clients are still there. The practice has grown 30% since I left it. And every now and then I go and do a locum there, which is lovely. So that's it, you know. Start off with your foundations. Don't kid yourself. Don't miss out on the steps of getting your mindset right, getting your finances right, getting your business structure right, learning about the interface between your business and yourself. They're your foundations. You can't move on to phase 2, until those foundations are right. Phase 2, we're going to just go really vertical with a select group of people. Poise your growth. There's no rush. Don't stress out about growth. Who cares if you have to work an extra year? It really doesn't matter. But what matters is you're going to line up all your values so that everything is going to be really easy. Your authenticity is going to be extremely natural, to the point where you're going to have, I even had maybe 15 of my favorite clients invited me to their deaths. You know, I adjusted a lot of my clients in the 2 hours before they died. And they certainly didn't want me to improve their headaches or any, you know, they just wanted a better transition. They just wanted their spirit to leave their body and move on out of the body into the next whatever we go into in an integrated way. And we just really loved each other. It's such a privilege to adjust somebody who you've been adjusting monthly for a decade, and to be at their death is a very, very big privilege, actually.
Vismai, do you think even now, like with what's happened with COVID, that funneling out of people who align with your values is actually happening right now? Because those who will come back and stay are the ones that are more within your value system. Like maybe we're having a fast track of that funneling, right?
Well, here's the deal. It's always happening. It's just most chiropractors are not aware of it. Mm-hmm. It's always friggin' happening. Like this stuff, I'm not making up something new for COVID. This is it. This is how I do it. I'm not tweaking something for this situation that we're in. Like this is how it always happens. And if you've had an office for longer than 10 years, you'll start to notice that. It's just I just got some great help from Dr. Guy Rickman. You know, I was just at the right spot at the right time with the right, you know, I just had all these questions and I couldn't make sense of my business or my community. And that was like, you know, when you're trying to look for a clear way, when you're looking through a forest, I just found the clear way, and I just developed it for the next 10 years after that, actually.
Well, on one of the other ones I did, Ryan Ryder came on, and he was talking about the 80-20 rule. And it was like, yeah, that there's this percentage of our practice that actually makes our practice, you know, and
Yeah,
focusing
sure.
on that percentage, those people is where you, and if that's where you want your growth, that's exactly what you guys did. You focused on those, and they were the ones that then grew. They were the flowers that you wanted in your garden, you know?
Yeah, it really was, you know. And then, you know, we had 4 chiropractors there, all with amazing, you know, retention rates. And yeah, it was just, we collected our avatars, and they bought avatars, and it gave a sense of grace and ease. And we had a high profitability, low cost sort of model that just really got us out of the rat race, actually, you know. And we're just starting now in Singapore. I'm in my office now in Singapore.
That's what I was going to say. How can people get in contact with you if they want to ask you some more questions?
They can just look me up on Facebook. I'll put my, where's my, I just put my name here, maybe.
Oh no,
yeah, you really
see the link in the chat group anyway.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Just
right.
Reach out if you're having any struggles with attracting values, or that you're concerned about this leaky bucket thing. I mean, we all go through it. You know, I'm living an extremely blessed life now on Bali, surfing, 2 healthy kids, not too much stress going on, but it certainly wasn't always like that. You know, I really did the work, grinded away, had the sweaty, sleepless nights, and did the work and popped out the other side. You know, now practice for me is just a sense of grace and ease, actually. You know, it's happening a lot quicker this time, so I don't have to go through 10 years of learning. I can accelerate my learning.
Yeah.
You know, from the model that we took 10 years to do, now I can do it within a year.
Well, Vismai, thank you so much. It's actually a real inspiration. And hopefully on the call today, there's some people that are just starting out and like are worried or whatever, but it's a journey, and you get there and you learn, and you can come out the other side, you know?
Yeah, we certainly do. Good luck with everybody heading back to work. I really hold my breath for all of us, and just, you know, there's a lot happened with all your clients in the time that you're not there. So put on your love guns if you can muster that up, if you're okay yourself. You know, like I've been up and down with my energy, with my, you know, my first week was horrible. Actually, after that, I was quite lonely the first week because I'm away from the family. But then after that, I kind of found my energy levels, and I found my creativity, and I had a nice inner journey, actually. But hopefully you guys can muster that up for all your community, and let's see how it goes, huh?
All right, guys. Thank you all for being on the call. Thank you, the Toms. And yeah, thanks, guys, for a great call tonight. I'll upload the video on the.
Thank you very much for having us. I think what you're doing is great, Erin. I really appreciate it. And thank you very much.
Me too, Erin. Really nice to see you again.
It's great to see you, Vismai. Yeah. And Tom, great to see you getting kisses from your kids. It's good to see that they love you.
I'm jealous, Tom.
Bye. See you, everybody.
Bye. Bye.